Welcome, book lovers and literary snobs, to Have You Read This, the podcast, where we pretend to care about what you're reading while secretly judging your taste. Your host, the self-appointed authority on all things written, Jason Morrison, is here to deliver the hottest takes on books, from the masterpieces that no one asked for to the classics everyone pretends to have finished. So, grab an energy drink and 10 ibuprofen, because he is about to drag you kicking and screaming through yet another episode.
Turns out there are about 11 of you out there who have found my YouTube channel, and how that happened, I don't know, but thank you. I initially thought it would be just some other place for me to, upload the podcast to. Some people love listening to audio through YouTube. And I've kind of been working on also using it for creating relaxing and meditative type videos to play in the background while you read, study, pass out from taking 30 ibuprofen, or maybe relax before bed. I don't know. And I'm just toying around with the idea of creating a video for each book that I review as well. Of course, that depends on the time that I have available. And I love the 11 of you that subscribed, but I don't know if I love you that much to put all that time in. I guess we'll see. So I've said this before, and it looks like I'm just going to continue saying it again. If you know me, I repeat everything a lot. I've got 5 stories in my head, and you're just going to have to bear with me while I repeat them. But dystopian fiction, seriously, my all-time favorite thing ever. That goes for books, that goes for movies. Whenever I stumble across a book where a reviewer claims that they've read their new favorite dystopian novel, I'm usually pretty skeptical about that. So I came across All the Fiends of Hell by Adam Nevill. As much as I've read over the years, this was a new author for me. Had never even heard of the guy. I didn't even know that Netflix has adapted 2 of his stories into movies. One of those was No One Gets Out Alive, and the other is The Ritual. I'd kind of heard about these movies, but I had no idea of the person that was responsible for writing them. On to the book.
A newly minted ruin of civilization. The epic scale shortened his breath. They'd entered a unique existence, never before conceived by anyone but religious fanatics. Their prophecies of how the world would end had been more accurate than scientific predictions of pandemics, nuclear confrontations, and the consequences of runaway climate change. But the chosen had not been saved as predicted. Instead, the overlooked had briefly been put aside before destruction.
So yes, this is an end-of-the-world scenario. No, this was not something that I had read before. And I say that like sorta. It's getting more and more difficult to create truly unique dystopian fiction that hasn't been done before. Most recently, books like Before and After by Andrew Shanahan and I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman come to mind right away. Both of those stories, those were entirely unique to me, and I found them very well written. When All the Fiends of Hell by Adam Nevill popped up on my radar, I was instantly drawn in by the cover. Now, this happens from time to time, even though I say don't ever pick out a book just because it has a cool cover. But if you look at it, some of you might think, wow, looks a lot like Kathy Griffin on the cover. But it's actually one of the Fiends of Hell. You got to pay close attention, but if you stare long enough, I think you can tell the difference, because really I think Kathy has probably a little bit more hair. So I pulled this from Goodreads, and this synopsis reads, I don't want to read this because I'm too lazy to summarize it. The Red Night of Bells heralds global catastrophe, annihilation on a biblical scale. Seeing the morning is no blessing. The handful of scattered survivors are confronted by blood-red skies and an infestation of predatory horrors that never originated on Earth. an occupying force intent on erasing the remnants of animal life from the planet. Across the deserted landscapes of England, bereft of infrastructure and society, the overlooked can either hide or try to outrun the infernal hunting terrors, until a rumor emerges claiming that the sea may offer an escape. Ordinary, unexceptional, directionless Carl is one of the few who made it through the first night. In the company of 2 orphans, he flees south, but only into horrifying revelations and greater peril, where a transformed world, an expanding race of ravening creatures await. Driven to the end of the country in himself, he must overcome alien and human malevolence and act in ways that were unthinkable mere days before. When I first picked up the end of the world theme and people heading towards the sea, The Road by Cormac McCarthy popped in my head. The world that Nevill describes, it actually gave me McCarthy vibes as well. But hear me out. I am not suggesting at all that Nevill just copied McCarthy. What I am saying is that Nevill does such a superb job of creating a world so entire and so encompassing that I felt fully enveloped into it. He used such beautifully evil and descriptive language to build this new world, but also combined it at the same time with a very real and plain dialogue between characters that made it super interesting to follow. I also picked up a little bit of The Mist by Stephen King, some of War of the World kind of vibes, and just a tad bit of I Am Legend. These are all just similarities that I noticed. I would not sit here and say that Nevill, what he did was he went out and got all of these stories together and he took all of the components and then he built his story based on this stolen foundation. I'm just saying that being someone who absolutely loves anything into the world, I was reminded of certain aspects of those stories that showed up in this book, but only in a good way. When I read Cormac McCarthy's The Road, one aspect that stood out to me was this world that he created. And within those pages, I felt like I was just thrust into that world. I feel like I was walking with the father and the boy throughout the whole thing. And I feel like the same can be said for the world that Nevill created here. Like there were times where I was reading these passages and I would just stop and be like, holy crap, that was good. Just how did he come up with putting that together? And I would go back and reread the thing because it was so good. Here's an example. Discolored veins of vapor hidden from sight the last time he'd inspected the sky from a different angle were no horrible apparent in the west. From a vast wall of crimson cloud that defined the horizon, a rosy hue seeped deeper south, threading between troughs of fragmenting cumulus. Blood trickling between stones towards them. Beneath the fresh scarlet threads, a red haze was visible like distant rainfall, probably fog. And then here was another one that just kind of jumped out at me. No human geometry, design, or recognizable architecture could he discern from these intricate gallows upon which the vanquished had been threaded and twisted and broken into the disorder of man-made materials to convey an awful aesthetic. None but the depraved could have imagined such a thing, and only then in the furthest leaps of abstraction. I mean, who puts stuff together like that? Isn't that good? And I know I'm not doing it justice by reading it because you're stuck with my voice. This is why I want you to go get the book so you can read it and you can have your own voice in your head as you're reading this thing. But just one more I wanted to throw out there. Above, in every direction, a watery red glow beat through fragments of black clouds, smoldering coals, the vaulted ceiling of hell. They would drive below it, across the gored landscape, to find grayer skies and chemical light, the only remaining vestiges of a world in which they might linger a little longer. I just give me 1,500 pages of that. That was so, all of these things. And the whole book is filled with this descriptive language that just sucks you into this world and makes you feel like you're one of the few people that has survived the Night of the Bells. I just found myself lost in this world, trapped in it, even frustrated that I was stuck in it. I wanted a way out. I wanted to know how the heck this happened in the first place, what this evil alien new thing that was hunting us was. Where did all of this come from? So this story, we follow Carl, the main character, in our journey through this new hell. And we navigate this terrible world full of evil, unexplained, and all-encompassing. Now, there's a lot of Hollywood action movies where you're in this crazy scenario and it just magically come across this one person who has this MacGyver-like skill set. Carl is the opposite of that. He's not a superhero. He's not equipped with knowledge and abilities meant for end-of-the-world survival. Carl's like just this regular dude you would probably pass at a store and not think twice about. And I love this because it makes him more vulnerable. And I felt like because he is just this regular guy, you kind of get drawn into the thing even more. It reminds me of Dawn of the Dead. I'm talking about the remake where they're questioning Michael, and I can't even remember the exact dialogue, but they're like, who are you? Like, why are you trying to be in charge? And he basically says, I sold TVs at Best Buy. But really, he's somehow equipped with all this knowledge to save this group from the zombie apocalypse. How did all of these people know and have this innate ability to totally rebuild a bus in a basement to travel and survive a horde of 1,000 zombies? Like, get out of here. Carl doesn't just seem unprepared. Like, he actually is. He doesn't have all of these things. And I just thought that was a really good touch. And I wanted someone that would stumble and struggle through this like a regular person faced with evil would. Carl tries to make his way to where he feels he can escape and survive this new hell. And we follow his journey, and we're shown evil in a new and different way. These are not zombies that are crawling their way forward to eat the brains of the living. These are apparitions, quote unquote, stay-heres, horrors, unveiled only in specific light with clicks and smells. For some reason, that touch of the clicks and this unique smell, that was so good. That was something different. And I love that. That was just a great addition to the story. And to me, it made it even more frightening. I want so badly for this to be a movie because I want to see the effects. I want to see the visuals and how they would pull this off. But at the same time, I kind of don't want it to be a movie because I feel like they're just not going to do this novel justice. Sometimes the movies, they come close, but I don't want them to ruin it. This thing is just so pure as it is. And I don't get scared from books. I don't think I ever really have, and I don't expect to now. That's not a slight against Nevill and his work. His book probably would terrify someone who isn't as desensitized as I am. But when you stop and think about this evil that he's describing, and then you place yourself in that situation, the way that he's allowed you to because of how he's written it, it really is brilliantly dark, and it's a great horror novel. Obviously, I loved everything about this book. I love Carl being a regular person. I love the tension of him feeling responsible for two young kids that weren't his own. Like, it's not enough to kind of, okay, we're going to follow one person to go through it. It's like, oh, let's attach him to two young kids. Nobody wants to go through the end of the world, much less be responsible for two young kids that aren't their own, right? I just love this world that Nevill built, and he just traps readers in all the way through to the very end. And yes, I loved the ending. I got so hype reading this thing, and I thought, man, if you screw up this ending, I'm never going to read or buy any of your crap ever again, but he delivered. I thought it was great. And yes, I gave this one 5 stars on Goodreads, and I even loved it so much I even went over to Amazon, did the same thing. This one was an instant favorite and one that I will probably forever recommend. I love this from start to finish. So anybody out there who loves dystopian fiction or alien horror, kind of sci-fi kind of vibe, I just don't see how you can read this and not enjoy it.
Survivors were mere witnesses, a scattering of stragglers. No one would ever hear their brief stories. There were no more stories. A few desperate actions remained to be unrecorded and unremarked upon. Narrative had ended. Everything mankind had done and built and known was redundant, discarded. The world was a landfill.